Jackson.
Reloading!
Charlie 2 is being attacked by U.S. forces.
Hey guys, OriginalAndyB here, and today I want to talk about everything going on up to the launch of Battlefield 2042, which is now just a few short weeks away. I want to start by saying I don't want to be one of those cloud chasers just raging on any issue that could potentially be in the game come launch, saying it'll be dead on arrival or anything like that. But I do have some things I want to see worked on prior to launch or even the few months after launch, some of which I talked about in my earlier video. I don't think these issues would be game-breaking, rather just things that could be tweaked to make the overall experience a little better and a little smoother. Before I get into the meat of it, if you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe and click the bell to turn on notifications to keep up with all things Battlefield. With that being said, let's get into it. DICE is set to make an official blog post later this week, giving a full rundown of all the feedback they received following the beta. I think this is a good time to put my thoughts out there. Starting with movement, which I personally really liked in the beta. A lot of concern happened during and following the open beta about this topic. A lot of people were saying it didn't feel like Battlefield and that it was more like copying Warzone, which is a bit due to the perceived overall quickness of the sprinting and the tactical sprinting, which is the sprint where you raise your gun on the screen and you move at a faster speed. Drunksy, who is the core gameplay designer at DICE, recently tweeted some information regarding the movement system of 2042. He clarified the whole sprint speed issue, saying that the sprint speed of Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 was 6.5 meters per second. The sprint speed in Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5 were both 6.04 meters per second. But with the sprint perk equipped in those games, you could run at 7.15 meters per second, which is pretty quick. The default sprint speed of 2042 is in fact the same as Battlefield 3 and 4 at 6.5 meters per second. But with the addition of the tactical sprint feature, you can go a little bit quicker than normal at 7.25 meters per second. The difference in feel from Battlefield 3 to Battlefield 2042 is due to the walk and run acceleration being a little bit quicker in Battlefield 3. The addition of the tac sprint is good from getting from cover to cover or transversing across some of those large open areas we saw in Orbital, for example, with the rolling hill area populated with all those trees and bushes. During the beta, I used the tac sprint quite a bit to get to where I needed to go without feeling like I was a sitting duck. Another area within the movement system was sliding. Firstly, within the beta, sliding would lock you into going just forward. According to Drunksy, the team is updating this a little bit to allow you to have a slight amount of directional movement during your slide. The other area of sliding that's being addressed is the perception that you're moving much faster than you actually are. And this is due to the intense field of view scaling that happens during sliding. This is being massively scaled back as to not force the perception that you're moving at such an insane slidey boy speed. A third area of the movement system that was addressed was jump spamming or bunny hopping, stating it was already fixed in the current build at the time the beta went live, but the beta was a few months old, so it didn't make it into that version. I didn't personally experience this too often in the beta, but I mean, it would be pretty annoying to get into any kind of engagement situation and just having a jumpy boy fly out of the way and you can't even hit your shots. Drunksy also talked about vaulting in 2042. He said the vault height is 2.4 meters, which is the same as it was in Battlefield 5. Now though, you can grab ledges above you, which was not possible in Battlefield 5. Certain objects placed throughout the environment, like shipping containers that we saw in Orbital, exceeded that max vault height because they were 2.6 meters high, as to not allow players to vault over everything and to not degrade the pacing and overall experience of the gameplay flow. They don't want to make the map feel unnatural or unbalanced, and it's good to hear DICE putting in some effort on the map design to keep the intended flow of each map intact. Adding to vaulting, DICE are adding the ability to vault over moving objects, which was not active in the beta build. This wasn't necessarily a feature that was really missed on Orbital, but other maps have large-scale moving objects such as Manifest. That's that big open shipping container yard set in Brainy Island, Singapore. During the course of each match on Manifest, cranes will be picking up and moving around shipping containers which players will be able to walk on during the whole moving process. Crouch running, the ability to go prone on your back and then turn around to be in a normal prone that we saw in Battlefield 5, and manual leaning are not going to be present in Battlefield 2042. I would say the chances of them making it into the game now are down to slim and none. They attribute a lot of these minimal movement mechanics being taken out as they promoted camping, and DICE doesn't want people just laying around on their backs pretending they're dead in 2042. Now into the next big area of concern are the amount of bugs that we saw during the beta. With the complexity of games now, there are so many moving parts, it's inevitable that a game, especially a beta build, will have bugs. No game I've ever played at launch is bug-free, so this is something that we all kind of have to live with. It really all depends on your own personal tolerance for bugs that make it into a game come launch. DICE has a history, recently especially, of buggy launches. Battlefield 4 was horrible when it launched, Star Wars Battlefront 2, and most recently Battlefield 5. Now, if the build we saw in the beta launched as the final game, that would understandably cause a huge outrage in the community. There is good news though. The beta was months old, and a lot of the bugs in the beta have apparently already been fixed. Since the beta, there has been confirmation that a lot of the bugs that weren't initially addressed have been since, and they are since working on them. I am optimistic by the time of release that they will squash most of them. I would count the audio in with the bugs, and Drunksy confirmed on Twitter that the audio mix in the beta was nowhere near close to the final build. Fingers crossed, boys, we're so close. And then I also wanted to talk about some HUD elements. I want to see the HUD and the UI really fine-tuned for the release. They are off to a really good start, and I know these elements are some of the last things that are worked on in the development process. I think the elements that are really good are the minimap and your squad list on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, and your loadout information on the bottom right-hand side. I think these are both really clean and really fitting with the setting. What I do think could be improved upon are the huge hit markers that appear on screen. They could either be scaled down by default or just give us the ability to customize them on our own. I know in previous titles, there's so many different user input abilities to change anything on the HUD, like colors, anything like RGB sliders, all that kind of stuff. So I feel like in the final build, there will be more customization in that regard. I talked about this in my earlier video too, but the pure amount of information shown at any given time on screen is a bit overwhelming. With no clear hierarchy of objective proximity, or friendly drones or tanks or helicopters, a lot of that stuff I don't even need to see, especially if they aren't even in my line of sight. Like where my team's drones are out over the other side of the battlefield, I don't really care about that. Again, objective indicators should be bigger in size the closer they are to you, and have more opacity the further they are away. I guess this is just my inner designer screaming that there isn't a clear hierarchical division amongst everything that pops up in your screen. I also want to talk about some elements of the gunplay system. I think the balance of the gunplay also needs to be addressed a little bit. The laser beam M5, for example, could use some recoil to balance out this beast, whereas sniping for me felt a little lackluster. I think mainly it's the bullet velocity and bullet drag, at least for the SWS-10, that felt so slow to me. I love running a sniper loadout, and I have loved running a sniper loadout on all previous Battlefield titles, but I think the balance they had in Battlefield 5 was damn near perfect, aside from, you know, the anti-tank rifles in that game. In 2042, I did get used to it, and the sniping did feel a little bit weaker than that of Battlefield 5 and 1. I know it takes time to hone in the gun balance for these games, so I'm willing to be patient and wait for launch to try out some of the other rifles to see if they have any better bullet velocity and not the severe effects of the bullet drag that we saw in the beta. I also talked about the specialists in my previous video, but I know the community is torn on this whole matter. This late in the dev cycle, I would say that it's such a cornerstone element of the gameplay loop that it isn't going to be removed or completely overhauled. Maybe just refined a little bit, and I think that could go a long way in pleasing some of those who are upset with this design decision. I talked about this in my other video too, but the small tweaks to specialists would be huge moving forward, differentiating the same specialists on opposing teams from each other visually. Perhaps locking in that second gadget slot to a selection of things that are more appropriate for that intended specialist, whether it's class-specific gadgets for like McKay, for example, so you can't just spawn with like a medic crate and you're running this assault main class, you know what I mean? I don't think that they would take away the specialists and then just re-implement a traditional class system like we saw in previous titles, as this is like one of the main marketing components to this game, and it's something that they've talked about from day one. That about sums it up for me today. What do you guys think needs to be addressed in these final weeks before launch? Leave a comment below on your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, and if you didn't, a dislike. If you do in fact like what you see, be sure to click subscribe below to keep up with everything Battlefield. With that being said, thank you guys for watching.